Hello, my name's Neil Smith. I'm a retired architect from England living in Spain. If you like this presentation, please support it. This is about the reconstruction of Gaza. The present problem is that there are a million tons of rubble to be disposed of, and it's clear that the solution may take a long time if it's dealt with in a conventional manner. My solution is to use the rubble, which is existing, to create harbours for ships and buildings whilst the reconstruction of Gaza is concentrated on the land. The second problem is that the entire population of Gaza cannot leave the Gaza Strip during reconstruction. There may be a number of people who wish to leave. However, the majority, just under 2 million, wish not to do so. The solution is to create new land, new places for them to live on whilst the existing land is used for the reconstruction of infrastructure and buildings. This is the principle of my idea. It is to use the rubble to create harbours and piers in the sea just off the coast. You can see that the land is flat. There's a wide beach and the Mediterranean Sea to accomplish this. The idea is not original. It's already been done in Dubai, where the famous palm tree island is used for buildings for people to live at fairly high cost. However, this would not be my scheme would be more simple, but the principle is sound. There is already a military pier which has been built by the Americans for the purpose of delivering supplies. It hasn't been used as efficiently as it could have been because of the waves, and it was a floating pier. The piers, in theory, can be also used for delivery by ships. Roll-on, roll-off ships can be used for delivering materials, supplies, vehicles, etc. However, these piers will obviously be of solid construction, and storms and waves will not hinder any progress. There are phases for the construction to take place. The main problem at the moment is clearly unexploded ordnance, which will have to be cleared very methodically, and sadly there will be bodies also for disposal in the rubble, with the respect for the relatives, etc. There is already a road running along the strip, but this can be improved and used for the delivery of any form of shelter and supplies to the people who are there. Local markets can be set up, and life, as much as possible, can return to at least a basic level. This will include the establishment of services, sewers, electricity, water and power, and all forms of communication. Hospitals, schools, shops, government offices can also be prioritised. The other aspect of this idea, using the harbours and piers, will be to more large houseboats. There is already one in the UK, and here's a photograph of it, which is near the island of Portland in southern England. It is presently used for asylum seekers and holds up to 500 people. It may not be a floating hotel, but it is basic accommodation and shelter which people so desperately need. As far as funding goes, it's quite possible that sympathetic countries around the world could be given the plans for these, and they can reconstruct them in their using their own shipbuilding facilities, and then float them as required to the harbours where they can be used. Phase 2, approximately 2025, the harbour walls can be made stronger, etc., using concrete, and the houseboats could be started as I've already described. There will also still be a need for temporary shelters on land, which are already in existence but need to be increased, as will new services, and farming and fishing will need to be re-established where possible, also as soon as possible. Here's a picture of the concept from above, showing the, in this case, 2 piers going out and 2 harbours in U-shape. At the end of the pier, it's possible for large ships to moor and unload. And you can also see in this illustration the houseboats between the 2 piers, harbour walls, which can be lined up as and when they arrive from the donor countries. And you see the importance of the coast road in forming and establishing communication by road, not only to temporary shelters and important buildings on land, but also to the harbours and piers. Phase 3, ideally starting in 2027, is completing the initial phases and clearing the rubble, repairing buildings. There are a number which may be possible to repair, set up to 25%, and that may be the owner's preference. However, the majority still require new accommodation. The important buildings such as hospitals, etc., will hopefully by 2027 be fully operational again, as will the harbour walls. I call here the floating houseboats botels, although clearly they will be of a very basic nature. And the services, very important, can begin to be servicing the population and bringing a lot more comfort. Here's a larger view of phase 3. You can see here the harbour walls and the piers being built out, and there would, I envisage, be 40 of these along the entire 40 kilometres of coast, each one taking up obviously 1 kilometre. You see here also a cruise ship could be used to tie up against the harbour. There are many following the pandemic which have fallen into disuse, and rather than breaking them up, it would be possible to use old cruise ships for a number of years for very rapid accommodation, and perhaps for storing for future disasters worldwide in similar situations. Phase 4, looking ahead 10 years, 2025, will be complete the first 2 phases. Hopefully the temporary shelters and other temporary arrangements will no longer be needed, and people will be using the new repairs and constructions. Also the harbour walls will be good for marine life, fish and smaller sea animals, etc., and will help generate new fishing industry, at least a basic supply of food for the people who live there. Here's a map of the Gaza Strip. It's about 6 to 12 kilometers in width at any one point, but you can see there's plenty of room for at least 40 of these harbours and piers. It doesn't have to be that number, it could be less, it might even be more. But there are 1.65 million people in need of temporary housing, and you see here a breakup of the different types of accommodation: the houseboats, hotels, harbour houses, that is houses built on the harbour walls, the curved walls, old crude ships, which I've mentioned. There will always remain shelters, temporary shelters on land, but clearly through cold winters these are not first choice. However, a rough calculation using these figures means that 1.68 people could be accommodated at each harbour and pier. Thank you for watching this presentation. Please share it with your friends and anybody you think may be interested, particularly anybody with access to politicians. Further information can be found in a very good article by the United Nations. Thank you for watching.